The sun beat down on the stretched highway as the rumble of motorcycles filled the air. The Brotherhood of Legacy and Cultural Knowledge Motorcycle Club, known as Black to most folks, was in the middle of their yearly cross-country ride. 15 riders strong, they'd been on the road for 4 days straight, their bikes gleaming under the Texas sun. The road trip wasn't just about feeling the wind on their faces. These riders came together every year to visit Black historical sites across America, connecting with communities along the way. There were teachers, mechanics, business owners, and healthcare workers when not riding, united by their love for motorcycles and commitment to uplifting their communities. "Let's stop here," called out the club president, a tall man with graying dreadlocks tied back beneath his helmet. His stomach had been growling for the last 20 miles, and the small roadside diner ahead looked like the perfect spot to rest their tired bodies and fuel up. One by one, they pulled into the gravel parking lot, the engines of their Harleys and Indians going quiet as they dismounted. Stretching their legs, they removed their helmets and riding gloves, revealing faces lined with both wariness and determination. "Man, I hope they got some decent food in there." "I'm starving," said the club's treasurer, patting his stomach as they gathered near the entrance. The moment they pushed open the glass door of Dot's Diner, the buzz of conversation inside dimmed. All eyes turned to the group of black bikers in their leather jackets, club patches prominently displayed on their backs. The waitress behind the counter froze mid-pour, coffee overflowing the mug she was filling. The club's vice president, a woman with intricate braids and 20 years of riding experience, whispered, "Same old story. You'd think they never seen black folks before." They found tables near the back, pushing a few together to accommodate their group. The other diners slowly returned to their meals, but the atmosphere remained tense. The waitress eventually made her way over, her smile tight as she handed out menus. As they settled in, the club's road captain noticed someone sitting alone in the far corner booth. The man was hunched over a laptop, baseball cap pulled low, but there was something familiar about him. "Hey," he nudged the president, keeping his voice low. "Isn't that Elon Musk over there?" The president squinted across the diner. Sure enough, the distinctive profile of the tech billionaire was visible as he turned to take a sip of coffee. The red MAGA hat on his head stood out like a beacon. "What's he doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" asked one of the newer members, a former auto worker who'd lost his job when a factory closed and moved operations overseas. Word spread quickly through the group. Several members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many had experienced firsthand the racial tensions that had flared up around MAGA symbolism in recent years. Others had strong opinions about Musk's business practices and public statements. The diner seemed to grow quieter as other customers began noticing the dynamic, the famous billionaire in one corner and the group of black bikers in the other, with an almost visible tension stretching between them. "Remember why we founded this club?" the president said quietly to the group. "It wasn't just about riding. It was about building bridges and changing perceptions." The club's community outreach coordinator, a woman who ran youth programs back home, nodded slowly. "Maybe this is one of those moments where we can make a difference, one conversation at a time." The youngest rider fidgeted with his silverware. "After what his company did to our community? Man, I lost cousins, uncles, neighbors, all laid off when that plant shut down." The president understood the pain behind those words. He felt it too. But he also believed in the power of unexpected connections. He'd seen too many situations escalate because people chose confrontation over conversation. He took a deep breath and stood up. "I'm going to talk to him." "You sure that's wise?" asked the vice president, concern evident in her voice. "No," he admitted with a slight smile. "But sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're afraid to have." As he walked across the diner floor, boots heavy on the linoleum, the other customers watched with wide eyes. The waitress froze again, this time clutching a pot of coffee like a weapon. The diner fell completely silent. Elon Musk looked up from his laptop, startled by the shadow that fell across his table. His eyes met the steady gaze of the biker standing before him, and for a moment, neither man spoke. What happened next would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The club president stood there for what felt like forever, the weight of everyone's eyes on his back. Musk looked up from his laptop, his expression changing from surprise to curiosity. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" the president asked, his deep voice carrying across the now silent diner. Musk hesitated, then closed his laptop and gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Be my guest." As the president sat down, the rest of the Black Motorcycle Club watched intently. The former auto worker clenched his fists under the table, memories of his layoff still fresh. 6 months without work had nearly cost him his house before the club members pitched in to help. "I'm the president of Black," he said, extending his hand. "Brotherhood of Legacy and Cultural Knowledge." Musk shook it firmly. "Interesting acronym." "We chose it on purpose," the president replied with a small smile. "Sometimes you have to earn the words people use against you." Back at their tables, the club members exchanged glances. The vice president leaned forward, straining to hear the conversation. The younger riders fidgeted nervously, while the older members maintained their calm, having seen enough in their lives to know that moments like these could go either way. "That hat's caused a lot of pain for folks who look like us," the president said, nodding toward the red MAGA cap Musk wore. Musk's hand moved to the brim, as if he'd forgotten he was wearing it. "It's complicated." "Life usually is," the president agreed, "but symbols matter." At a nearby table, a white couple whispered to each other, the woman clutching her purse closer. A trucker at the counter kept looking over his shoulder, his hand inching toward his pocket. The waitress had disappeared into the kitchen, perhaps calling for help. The tension in the diner was thick enough to cut with a knife. One of the Black members, a high school history teacher back home, slowly stood up. "I'm going over there too," he announced to the table. "You sure that's smart?" asked the road captain. "Might seem like we're ganging up on him." "Or backing up our president," the teacher replied, already walking toward Musk's booth. As he approached, he could hear the president explaining about their annual ride, how they visited historical sites, and did community outreach along the way. "Mind if I join?" the teacher asked, standing beside the table. Musk looked up and nodded, seeming more relaxed now. The teacher slid in next to the president. "I teach American history to high schoolers," he said, trying to show them the full picture, not just what's in the textbooks. "Education is everything," Musk responded, "though I dropped out of my PhD program after 2 days." The ice broken, their conversation began to flow more naturally. The rest of the diner watched in amazement as what had seemed like an inevitable confrontation turned into what appeared to be a civil conversation. One by one, other club members made their way over. The former auto worker was the last to approach, his reluctance evident in every step. "Your factory closing put 200 people out of work in my neighborhood," he said bluntly as he reached the now crowded table. "People with families, mortgages." The other bikers tensed, worried he'd gone too far, but Musk didn't dismiss him. "Which factory?" he asked instead. As the auto worker explained, the rest of the diners began to return to their meals, though many continued stealing glances at the unusual gathering. The waitress finally emerged from the kitchen, looking confused when she saw that the situation had somehow diffused itself. Outside, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, responding to what was likely a concerned call from someone inside. The officer peered through the window, brow furrowed at the sight of the billionaire surrounded by leather-clad bikers, all engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. The vice president noticed the officer and nudged the club secretary. "Looks like someone called the cops on us." Again. "Let them look," the secretary replied. "We're just talking." Back at Musk's table, the conversation had shifted to technology and community access. The club's community outreach coordinator, who'd been running coding camps for kids in underserved neighborhoods, leaned forward. "Our biggest problem is outdated equipment," she explained. "These kids have the brains and the drive, but we're teaching them on computers from 2010. Musk's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "What languages are you teaching them?" As she described their curriculum, something unexpected began to happen. The billionaire entrepreneur and the motorcycle club members found themselves building on each other's ideas, the initial tension giving way to something that looked almost like collaboration. None of them noticed when the police officer, seeing no disturbance, drove away. None of them paid attention to the other diners who had gone from fearful to fascinated. and none of them could have predicted where this unusual conversation would lead them next. The conversation at Musk's table had gone on longer than anyone expected. What started as a tense confrontation had somehow shifted into something else entirely. The loud chatter of the Bilek Motorcycle Club, mixed with Musk's distinctive laugh, filled the diner, drawing curious glances from the other customers. "So you're telling me these kids built a working robot from spare parts?" Musk asked the community outreach coordinator, clearly impressed. "On computers older than they are," she confirmed. "Imagine what they could do with proper equipment." The former auto worker, who had been quiet for some time, finally spoke up. "That's the thing about our neighborhoods. There's talent everywhere, but no resources. Kids with brilliant minds end up working dead-end jobs because nobody invested in them." Musk nodded slowly, turning his coffee mug in his hands. "I grew up in South Africa during apartheid. Different context, but I saw similar divides. Talent wasted because of who you were or where you came from." The club president raised an eyebrow, surprised by the personal admission. "Most folks just see you as the rich guy who posts memes online." "That's part of who I am," Musk admitted with a half-smile. "But not all of it." The diner had returned to its normal buzz of activity, though occasionally someone would snap a discreet photo of the unusual gathering. The waitress had warmed up considerably, keeping coffee cups filled and even joining the conversation occasionally. "My grandson wants to work with computers," she told them during one refill. "But his school cut the technology program last year. Budget cuts." The vice president nodded knowingly. "That's why we started our own programs. Can't wait for the system to fix itself." As afternoon stretched toward evening, the club secretary glanced at his watch. "We should get back on the road if we want to make it to the next stop before dark." There was a moment of awkward silence as everyone realized their unexpected meeting was coming to an end. The history teacher pulled out his phone. "I'd like to show you something before we go," he said, pulling up photos from their community center back home. He passed the phone to Musk, who swiped through images of kids learning coding, robotics workshops in a basement with mismatched chairs and outdated equipment, and graduation ceremonies where proud parents beamed at their children. "We make do with what we have," the teacher explained. "But imagine what these kids could accomplish with better resources." Musk handed the phone back, his expression thoughtful. "You've built something special there." The club president reached for the bill, but Musk was faster. "This one's on me." "We pay our own way," the president insisted. "Always have." Musk nodded, respecting the boundary. "Then let me make another offer. I'd like to visit your community center sometime. See it firsthand." The bikers exchanged glances, surprise evident on their faces. The community outreach coordinator recovered first. "You'd come to our neighborhood? For real?" "Why not?" Musk replied. "Sounds like you've got the next generation of engineers and programmers there. I'd be a fool not to check it out." The former auto worker, who had been the most skeptical, looked Musk straight in the eye. "And what about the hat?" he asked, nodding toward the red MAGA cap. Musk removed the hat and looked at it for a long moment. "Sometimes we wear things without thinking about how others see them," he said finally. He tucked the hat into his laptop bag instead of putting it back on. As they prepared to leave, the club members and Musk exchanged contact information. The diner patrons watched with fascination as handshakes turned into the Brotherhood's signature handclasp. Outside in the parking lot, the sunlight was fading as the bikers prepared to get back on the road. Musk walked out with them, still deep in conversation with the club president. "You know," Musk said as they reached the motorcycles, "I've been thinking about manufacturing issues in underserved communities for a while now. Maybe there's a way to bring some jobs back to your area." The former auto worker, who was already strapping on his helmet, paused. "You serious?" "I'm always serious about interesting problems," Musk replied. "And this is definitely an interesting problem." As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, Musk stepped back to watch. The club president started his bike and gave Musk a nod. 3 weeks from today," he said over the rumble of engines. "Our community center. Let's see if you really show up." "I'll be there," Musk called back as the bikes roared to life. Neither the billionaire nor the bikers knew it yet, but this chance meeting at a small Texas diner was about to change everything. 3 weeks passed quickly. Back home in Oakland, The Black Motorcycle Club members had told their story to friends and family, but few believed that Elon Musk would actually show up at their community center. "Rich folks make empty promises all the time," said an older member who had missed the road trip due to his bad knee. "I'll believe it when I see it." The community center itself was a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Broken windows were patched with plywood, and the roof leaked when it rained hard. Still, it was a place where neighborhood kids could learn valuable skills and stay off the streets. On the agreed-upon day, the club president arrived early to make sure everything was in order. The coding class was in session, with 20 teenagers working on mismatched laptops. In the main area, the robotics team was testing their latest creation, a small robot that could sort recyclables. "You really think he's coming?" asked the vice president, who had been skeptical from the start. "I don't know," the president admitted, "but we're doing good work here whether he shows up or not." By mid-afternoon, most club members had found reasons to drop by the center. The history teacher brought donuts. The road captain helped fix a leaky pipe in the bathroom. The former auto worker paced nervously, checking his watch every few minutes. "He's not coming," he finally announced at 3:15 p.m. "I knew it." Just as the words left his mouth, a nondescript sedan pulled up outside. No flashy Tesla, no entourage, just a single car with tinted windows. The club members gathered at the windows, watching as Elon Musk stepped out alone, wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt. No MAGA hat in sight. "I'll be damned," whispered the community outreach coordinator. The club president went to the door to greet him. "You actually came." "I said I would," Musk replied simply. He looked up at the faded sign above the door. "So this is it." Inside, the teenagers in the coding class didn't immediately recognize who had walked in. They were too focused on their screens, typing away on outdated laptops. One girl was practically banging on her keyboard in frustration. "What's wrong?" Musk asked, approaching her desk. "This stupid thing keeps freezing," she complained, not looking up. "I'm trying to render my 3D model, but it crashes every time." "Mind if I take a look?" he offered. When she finally glanced up, her eyes widened in recognition. "You're just a guy who knows a bit about computers," Musk said with a small smile. "Let's see what's happening here." For the next hour, Musk wandered through the center, talking with the kids, examining their projects, and asking questions about their work. He spent 20 minutes with the robotics team, offering suggestions on their recycling sorter. He sat with the coding instructor, discussing their curriculum and the challenges of teaching with limited resources. The club members watched with growing amazement. This wasn't just a photo opportunity for Musk. He was genuinely engaged, rolling up his sleeves and getting into the details. "What do you think?" the club president asked when they'd finally had a moment alone. "I think you're doing incredible work with almost nothing," Musk replied. "These kids are brilliant. That girl with the 3D modeling project. She's thinking about problems that my engineers grapple with." They walked through the leaky warehouse, stepping over buckets placed to catch drips from the ceiling. Musk noted everything: the exposed wiring, the struggling air conditioning system, the worn-out furniture. "What would you do if resources weren't an issue?" he asked. The president had been waiting for this question. He pulled out a folded paper from his pocket, a wish list the club had put together years ago but never had the funds to pursue. Better computers, obviously, a proper server, 3D printers, a dedicated space for robotics competitions, scholarships for the kids to continue their education. He hesitated, then added, "and maybe some job opportunities when they're ready." Musk studied the list carefully. "This is doable," he said finally. "All of it?" the president asked, surprised. "All of it and more," Musk confirmed. "But I have one condition." The president tensed. Here came the catch. "I don't want this to be a handout," Musk explained. "I want it to be a partnership. Your knowledge of this community plus my resources. We build something sustainable together." Before the president could respond, they were interrupted by a crash from the robotics area, followed by cheers. The recycling sorter had successfully completed its first full test. "Looks like we have something to celebrate," Musk said with a genuine smile. As they walked back to the main room, neither man realized that what had started as a tense confrontation in a Texas diner was about to change hundreds of lives. Word spread fast about Musk's visit to the community center. Local news picked up the story first, billionaire tech CEO working alongside black bikers to help inner-city kids. Then national outlets got wind of it. Within days, what had begun as a chance encounter in a Texas diner had become a viral sensation. "This is getting out of hand," the club president said, scrolling through his phone during their weekly meeting. The entire club had gathered in the back room of their favorite barbecue joint. "We've got reporters camping outside the center. Kids can't even get to their classes without microphones in their faces." The community outreach coordinator nodded in agreement. "But the attention has brought in donations. We've received more money in the past week than in the last 3 years combined." "It's not about the money," the former auto worker argued. "It's about whether this is real or just a PR stunt for him." As if on cue, the vice president's phone rang. She stepped outside to take the call, returning a few minutes later with wide eyes. "That was Musk's assistant," she announced. "He wants to meet again, tomorrow." The next day, they gathered at the community center, which was surrounded by news vans and curious onlookers. At exactly noon, a Tesla pulled up, and Musk stepped out carrying a large tube under his arm. Camera flashes went off immediately. Inside, with the doors locked against the media circus, Musk unrolled blueprints across a wobbly table. "I had my team work up some plans," he explained, weighing down the corners with coffee mugs. "A complete renovation of this building, plus expansion into the vacant lot next door." The club members gathered around, studying the detailed drawings. The plans showed a modern facility with dedicated spaces for coding, robotics, and digital manufacturing. There was even a small cafe area where students could work and collaborate. "This is," the road captain began, but couldn't find the words to continue. "It's just the beginning," Musk said. "I've also been talking with my factories about apprenticeship programs, specifically for graduates of your courses here." The former auto worker, who had remained the most skeptical, finally spoke up. "Real jobs, with benefits? Not just temp positions." "Real jobs," Musk confirmed. "But I'm going to need your help to make this work. You understand this community in ways I never could." The history teacher frowned slightly. "We've seen big promises before. Companies come in, get their tax breaks and good publicity, then disappear when the cameras leave." Musk nodded, acknowledging the concern. "That's fair. So let's put everything in writing. Create a proper partnership with accountability on both sides." For the next several hours, they hammered out details. The club would maintain control of the programs and curriculum. Musk would provide funding, equipment, and job pathways. Both sides would have responsibilities and expectations clearly outlined. As evening approached, one of the teenage students knocked on the door. She was the same girl Musk had helped with the 3D modeling project during his previous visit. "Sorry to interrupt," she said when they let her in. "But we heard Mr. Musk was here again, and we wanted to show him something." She led them to the main workspace where several students had gathered around a table. On it sat a small model of what appeared to be a new building. "We made this," she explained proudly. "After you left last time, we started thinking about what our dream center would look like. We've been working on it after classes." Musk crouched down to examine the model, genuinely impressed by the detail. The students had created a miniature version of their ideal community technology hub, complete with solar panels on the roof and a garden space. "You've thought of some things we missed," he said, pointing to various features. "Mind if we incorporate these ideas into the official plans?" The students beamed with pride. The club president watched the interaction with a mixture of hope and caution. He'd learned the hard way not to count on promises, especially from powerful people. But something about this felt different. Later, as they walked Musk back to his car through the crowd of waiting reporters, the president pulled him aside for a private word. "This partnership has to be real," he said firmly. "These kids are counting on it now. We all are." Musk looked him in the eye. "I understand, and I'm all in." As camera flashes popped around them, the two men shook hands. Neither could have imagined that their confrontation weeks earlier would lead to this moment, or what would come next. 3 months flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The old warehouse that had housed the community center was now unrecognizable. Construction crews worked day and night, transforming the leaky building into something the neighborhood had never seen before. The club president stood on the sidewalk early one morning, coffee in hand, watching workers install floor-to-ceiling windows where cinder blocks had once been. A group of neighborhood kids had gathered on their bikes, wide-eyed at the transformation happening before them. "Is it really going to have robots inside?" one boy asked, his sneakers worn but his eyes bright with curiosity. "Robots, computers, 3D printers, all of it," the president confirmed. "And it's all for you kids." The boy looked skeptical. "For real?" "Not just for rich kids." "For real," the president assured him. "This place is being built for this neighborhood. That means you." Similar conversations happened daily as the community watched with a mixture of hope and doubt. Many had seen promises come and go, businesses pop up and disappear, politicians make pledges that never materialized. But this time felt different. Steel and glass were replacing broken windows and crumbling walls. This was something you could see and touch. Behind the scenes, the partnership between the Bielek Motorcycle Club and Musk had its rough patches. During one particularly heated planning meeting, the former auto worker slammed his hand on the table. "These job training programs need to lead to actual jobs," he insisted, "not just certificates nobody recognizes." Musk had bristled initially at being challenged, but then nodded slowly. "You're right. Let me make some calls." The next week, representatives from 3 tech companies joined their meeting, ready to discuss guaranteed interview slots for program graduates. The club's community outreach coordinator left that meeting with tears in her eyes. "Do you know how long we've been trying to get these companies to even look at our kids' resumes?" she asked the club secretary afterward. "Years, and now they're coming to us." Not all challenges were so easily solved. Some community members were suspicious of outsiders bringing change, even positive change. Others worried about gentrification following close behind the new center. These concerns came to a head during a community forum held in a local church. "Once this fancy tech place opens up, rent's gonna skyrocket," one elderly resident pointed out. "Then where are we supposed to go?" The club's vice president, who had grown up 3 blocks away, understood these fears all too well. She took the microphone. "That's why we insisted on the housing protections," she explained. "As part of this partnership, there's legal support for tenants and funds set aside for property tax assistance for long-time homeowners. We've been where you are. We wouldn't sell our neighborhood out." Slowly, as weeks passed, the skepticism began to fade. The club members made sure Musk stayed connected not just to the project, but to the people it would serve. They took him on neighborhood walks, introduced him to local business owners, brought him to Sunday dinners in members' homes. During one such dinner at the home of the history teacher, Musk sat in the backyard with a plate of homemade mac and cheese, listening to stories about the neighborhood's past. "My grandmother remembers when this whole block was black-owned businesses," the teacher explained. "Barbershops, restaurants, a jazz club on the corner. Then the highway came through, cut the neighborhood in half. Businesses died out. But people here never lost their pride or their skills, just their opportunities." Musk was quieter than usual that evening. Later, as he was leaving, he stopped at the door. "I've been thinking," he said. "The tech center is just the beginning. What if we looked at revitalizing some of those commercial spaces too? Create an innovation corridor with black-owned businesses?" The club president raised an eyebrow. "That's a much bigger project than we discussed." "I know," Musk admitted, "but I'm starting to see this isn't just about teaching kids to code. It's about restoring what was lost." On the day before the grand opening, the club members gathered for a private tour of the completed center. The gleaming building was beyond anything they had imagined. Modern classrooms, cutting-edge equipment, spaces designed for learning and collaboration. In the main entrance hall hung a large photograph that caught everyone by surprise. It was an image of them all at that Texas diner months ago, the moment that had started everything. "Who put that there?" the road captain asked, staring at the picture. "I did," said Musk, walking in behind them, "to remind everyone that sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're afraid to have." The grand opening day arrived with perfect weather, sunny skies and a gentle breeze. By 8 in the morning, A crowd had already gathered outside the new center. Children pressed their faces against the glass doors, eager to see inside. Parents chatted nervously, many still not quite believing this place was really for them. The Belak Motorcycle Club members arrived together, their bikes thundering down the street in formation. They parked in a neat row and removed their helmets, taking in the scene before them. News vans lined the block. A stage had been set up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. People from all walks of life mingled in the crowd, neighborhood residents, corporate representatives, local officials, and curious onlookers. "Never thought I'd see something like this here," the road captain said quietly. The club president nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Long way from that diner in Texas. Musk arrived without fanfare, slipping through the crowd mostly unnoticed until he reached the club members. He looked different somehow, more relaxed, dressed simply in jeans and a button-up shirt. The media spotted him and cameras swung in their direction. "Ready for this?" he asked the club president. "Been ready my whole life," came the reply. The ceremony itself was brief but powerful. The mayor spoke about community renewal. The club's community outreach coordinator talked about the journey that had brought them to this moment. When it was Musk's turn to speak, he surprised everyone by keeping it short. "This isn't my achievement," he said into the microphone. "This belongs to the Belak Motorcycle Club and the people of this neighborhood. All I did was listen when they called me out on my blind spots. Sometimes the best investments happen when you're willing to be uncomfortable." The former auto worker, who had remained skeptical longer than anyone, was given the honor of cutting the ribbon. His hands trembled slightly as he raised the oversized scissors. "For our kids," he said, and snipped the red ribbon. Cheers erupted as the doors opened and people streamed inside. Children raced from room to room, touching equipment they'd only seen in movies. Parents wiped away tears as they realized the opportunities now available to their families. The local barber stood in the coding lab, shaking his head in amazement. "My grandson's been talking about computers since he was 5, he told the history teacher. Now he can learn right here, not have to go across town where they look at him like he doesn't belong." Throughout the day, the club members gave tours, explaining programs and introducing instructors. The teenage girl whose 3D modeling project had impressed Musk months ago was now a peer mentor, confidently showing younger kids how to use the design software. By late afternoon, most of the media had left, but the center remained packed. In a quiet moment, the club president found Musk sitting alone in the rooftop garden that had been the student's idea. "Taking a breather?" the president asked, joining him. Musk nodded. "Just thinking about ripple effects. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be here." "Same," the president agreed. "Life's funny that way." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Musk spoke again. "We've already got requests to replicate this in 5 other cities. Black chapters in Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago. They've all reached out." The president let this sink in. This was never just about one center in one neighborhood, was it? "Not anymore," Musk replied. "Not if you're willing to scale it." As the sun began to set, they made their way back downstairs for the evening program, a showcase of student projects. The main hall was packed with families seated on folding chairs. On stage, kids as young as 8 demonstrated the robots and programs they'd created during the center's soft opening weeks. A small boy, maybe 10 years old, stepped up to the microphone. His voice shook with nervousness, but his words came through clear. "Before this center opened, I didn't know people who looked like me could build robots or make computer games," he said. "Now I know we can build anything, even spaceships to Mars." He looked directly at Musk when he said this last part, and the audience erupted in laughter and applause. Later, as the event wound down and families began heading home, the Black Motorcycle Club gathered in the center's lobby. Their leather jackets stood out against the modern glass and steel, a reminder of the unlikely path that had brought them here. "What happens next?" the vice president wondered aloud. The club president looked around at the center, at the children still excitedly exploring, at the parents making plans for tomorrow's classes, at Musk chatting with the instructors about future programs. "Something better than anything we could have imagined," he said, "and it all started because we weren't afraid to speak up when it mattered."